Hey guys, welcome back to the Dmax build series. Today we're going to be working on a mod to hopefully make my life a little bit easier when I'm out on the tracks and pumping up my tires after an adventure. And that's going to be to install a permanently mounted onboard compressor system that can actually toggle itself on and off depending on if we've got that trigger squeezed, just like you would at a service station. Now this as a concept isn't anything brand new or revolutionary. They have been around for quite a while. However, what I reckon makes the system we're going to be installing kind of unique is that you can buy all the bits you need to perform this exact same installation for a couple of $100, and that's a lot cheaper than most of the alternatives. This is the gear we're going to be using to perform this installation, and if you've watched any of my travel episodes, you'll probably recognize this already. This is my trusty Dune 4-wheel drive air compressor, which is an absolute beast of a unit. It's got a flow rate of 160 litres per minute, and to put that into a bit of a real-world perspective, this unit will pump my big 33-inch mud tyres from 15 PSI up to 40 PSI in around 2 minutes, which is pretty crazy, and it's just a generally well-built and tough unit overall. It is, however, just a standard compressor, meaning we do have to set it up, clip it onto the battery, and plug our air hose in to actually use it. And that's not what we want for this setup, so that's where this extra piece of the puzzle comes in. This is a Dune air compressor conversion kit. This essentially works like a bit of a brain module for this compressor, telling it when to turn on or turn off, depending on whether we've got that trigger squeezed or not. So in this kit, it literally comes with everything we need to get this install done. We get the little brain module itself, that's what that unit just there is. Comes with a nice power cable there that we're going to run to our lithium battery in the canopy setup. And then there's just 2 ports on the side there, one for the compressor to run into and one for our air hose to connect to. So nice and simple. Also in the kit, we get a brand new air hose that's nice and coiled and should fit nicely in where I'm planning to install this system. A little air hose to plug between this compressor and that brain module. And of course, our new little inflation trigger that looks just like this. So when we squeeze the trigger, our tires will be inflating, and when we let it go, the compressor will turn off so we can check our tire pressures. To complete the installation, I've also bought myself a really nice big chunky switch. It looks a little bit like this. This is actually rated to 300 amps, so massively overkill for this job, but I just like the nice clicky switch style that it is, and it should be nice and durable in where it's going to be mounted. I've also bought a bunch of wiring. This is actually 6 BNS cable, which again is probably a bit overkill, but at least I know that it's definitely up to the task for running that compressor. And of course, to keep everything properly protected, I've also bought a small MIDI fuse holder that's got a 50 amp MIDI fuse in there. Now this compressor has a max draw of 45 amps, so that 50 amp fuse should be perfect. Anyway, that's all the gear we'll be installing in the setup. Time to get this installation underway. For the first step, I've actually crammed myself into the back of the canopy because I need to get power from my lithium battery, which lives just here, from the positive side of that lithium battery. And also I'll take the earth from my shunt just there. And that power has to run through the floor of the canopy to get out to where my compressor is going to live. Now, to try and make this as weatherproof as possible when I'm running wires through the floor of the canopy, I'm going to be using cable glands like this. So these should allow me to run that wire through the floor. They kind of clamp down on the wire as you tighten them to hopefully create a weatherproof seal. For the wiring, I'm running the earth to my battery shunt, which allows me to monitor my battery performance, and I'm connecting the positive cable straight to the positive terminal on my battery through that MIDI fuse holder, with the fuse removed until we finish the install. Alrighty, with the first stage of our wiring complete, we're ready to move on to mounting the compressor and the conversion kit. As for location, this really comes down to personal preference. I've seen people mount their onboard compressors under their bonnet, in the cab of their car if there's room to do so, in the back of their canopy setups, or where I'm going to be mounting mine, in my under tray toolbox. Now, I just reckon this is gonna be the perfect location for me. It's gonna mean that compressor is nice and tucked out of the way when it's not in use, but it's also gonna make it nice and easy to get to when it's time to pump my tires up. The only thing I will need to be mindful of is moisture getting into this toolbox and potentially damaging the compressor. Now, the toolbox itself is nice and weather sealed as it is, but I'm about to drill a bunch of holes in it, which will open me up to the risk of moisture getting in. So to try and combat that, I am gonna be installing these rubber washers on all the bolts I put through that toolbox. I'm going to further seal everything with this silicone. I know it says aquarium silicone, but hopefully it should still do the trick. And for getting power wires into this toolbox, I'm once again going to be using those cable glands to seal nice and tightly around those wires. Anyway, that's my rough plan. I'm now going to pull this toolbox off to make it a bit easier to get inside and access everything. To help me fit the compressor into my toolbox and to save a bit of space, I'm just removing this base plate by undoing these 4 screws. That compressor is now fully mounted in our toolbox, nice and solid, not going anywhere, and hopefully nice and weatherproof thanks to all that silicone and those rubber washers used to connect it through the base there. The next job is going to be to install our conversion kit in that toolbox alongside the compressor, but before I do so, I'm going to have to make a bit of modification to the wiring for our compressor, because obviously we aren't going to be needing these alligator clips any longer. So the compressor is going to be connected to this conversion kit here using the Anderson connection on the top there. So all I have to do is take my factory wiring, chop it back to about there, and then install my very own Anderson plug on the end of that wiring instead, and we should be good to go. With the wiring done, it's just a matter of connecting the compressor's outlet to the new controller using the included hose and plugging our new air hose into the other outlet. There we have it, my toolbox build is now complete. Turned out pretty nice, I reckon. And what's surprising to me is there's actually tons of space left in this toolbox for, tools or other bits and pieces in there too, as well as that compressor mount on the left-hand side. Now, if you're wondering why it looks like I've mounted those like the Dune control box and the switch on a bit of an angle in there, that's because when the toolbox is mounted, obviously I'm hoping those will then look nice and straight and the compressor will be the one on an angle. I've also just gone through and made sure all the wiring was covered in protective conduit. Even this little air hose piece there, I've protected that as well. And I've also just cable tied everything out of the way of anything that's going to be getting hot, because obviously these compressors get pretty hot when they're in operation, so I didn't want any of those cables resting on pieces that over time might cause them to melt and experience some damage. So I'm pretty happy. Like, it's not the tidiest job in the world, but I'm pretty confident that all that wiring is in a location where it should be safe for a long-term application. So the next job for me is going to be to get this toolbox reinstalled on the Dmax, connect all the final wiring pieces, and then we should be good to give it a test. Alrighty, the system is now fully installed, all my wiring's done, and I'm now very excited to give it its first official test run. So this is my new procedure for pumping up my tyres. Open that toolbox, grab my air hose out like so, and now turn this big isolator switch on. Now when I turn this on, it should fire the compressor up. It's then going to pressurize this line and then hopefully turn off when it reaches pressure if everything is working correctly. So we'll see how we go. Yes, that works perfectly. Very happy with that. And now when I squeeze this trigger, and then it cuts off again, gotta be happy with that. So no install is complete without a proper test run. So I've just dropped my back right tyre down to 15 PSI, my normal beach pressure. I've then popped that tyre valve cap back on, close the toolbox off, and what I'm gonna do is time how long it takes me to get this tyre back up to 40 PSI, my road pressure. So I've got my little stopwatch going just there. Hopefully you can see that. Hit start and let's go. There we go, just over 40 PSI, actually about 41. And that took me just over 2 minutes, probably 2 minutes and 15 seconds from no setup whatsoever, including the tyre valves cap on as well. And I reckon that is pretty decent to get a tyre back to 40 PSI. And just like that, the installation of my onboard air compressor system is now officially finished, and I honestly couldn't be happier. I reckon it's such an awesome system for the money. Like, a couple of $100 to get your very own onboard air compressor system just like a servo is a no-brainer in my books. So if you're interested, and as always, I'll leave links to all this stuff in the description down below if you're wanting to check it out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.